Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Takuma Inoue versus Tenshin Nasukawa fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon. As well, you can request any kind of combat sporting related content, and I will try my best to get out there for you guys. There's been plenty of videos, and I've really appreciated all the support in which I've had with it so far, and of course the link will be in the description. Let's get straight into this one though, and I think as a main event, this is a, outside of Japan, a main event that's criminally being underrated. I think it's a very good matchup, and it's a really good fight in my opinion. And like I said, the event as a whole is another, of course, Tekken Promotions, Ohashi Promotions top rank event. This one's a bit different. It's being streamed on Prime Video, and I'm not entirely sure if that is the new place for all Tekken shows. I don't know if Top Rank are possibly trying to work out to find a deal with Amazon Prime. Of course, Top Rank have been trying to put their shows for free to air on Toonami in America, and a couple other sites as well, Roku I think. And again, I don't think they have any official contract or big deal with them, but I feel like going onto Prime would be the exact same as what, of course, PBC have done, so that would be really good for Top Rank if they were able to get that sort of deal over the line. To actually speak about the fight though, and we'll, of course, start off with the main event, and I'm going to give a little prediction, of course, for the co-main event as well, because that's another underrated fight as well. But for, like I say, the main event, I'm not surprised that this fight is happening. I mean, since Takuma Inoue lost, I thought, especially with, as time went past and the longer and longer it went, and, it's been over a year now, and he was sitting out for a while, I thought there was a very high chance he was waiting around for the belts to become vacant for himself to get a shot at the title, of course. And it was kind of evident that the titles were going to become vacant at some point with the star in which Nakatani, of course, is becoming. It was evident that he was going to go and try and pursue bigger matchups at some point, and it was just kind of a matter of time for all these other contenders to wait. And I think Takuma Inoue might have realized that he's in a really good spot still with the rankings, and of course his name gets him opportunities, and so he kind of was just sitting around waiting for that opportunity and trying to force himself into that position to get himself a world title shot, which I do understand. It's a little bit frustrating because I mean I feel like a rematch between Inoue versus Satsumi could have been a good fight there to make, or at least for Inoue's brand, it would have been a nicer fight to make. But of course, I suppose it means that he's coming in heavily as an underdog. But when he's coming off a defeat to a guy who goes on to, then lose his title afterwards, it's not exactly like it's the most deserved of title shots, to be fair, for Takuma Inoue. Of course, he was a champion for a bit and held his title for a bit, but he never really fought any kind of high-level names. And then as soon as he fought a decent fighter, he lost. So again, it's interesting to see. And like I say, it's not surprising though, because of course, like I say, I was expecting him to just sit around and wait for a big opportunity like this. But for Tenshin Nasukawa, of course, he's a star. Like I say, I feel like maybe on paper this is a really good matchup as well, because for Inoue and his brand, like I say, he's going up against a really big name in Tenshin Nasukawa, and he's going to be, of course, a headline bill as well. So this is, of course, the biggest opportunity of Inoue's career, and again, it's coming off a loss, which is surprising. But like I say, for Nasukawa, he's somebody who, of course, came in with that big name, that big presence into the professional game. He was, he had that exhibition with Mayweather. He had that whole, kickboxing background, and he had a massive Japanese fan base. And like I say, as soon as he came into boxing, a lot of boxing fans that watched his debut could kind of see that they were going to try and build him up to be the next big Japanese star, which he kind of has, started to become. And if he's able to become a world champion here and, develop his skills even more and, become a unified champion or undisputed champion, he could be a really big name. He definitely has that star potential, and he already is a really big name in Japan, like I say, but just in the world. And like I say, I mean, since his debut, he's been put on big shows, on Inoue undercards, on Nakatani undercards. He's been moved very quickly as well. Of course, he's only had 7 professional fights. Of course, he has a very good kickboxing background and where he fought at a high level, but he has, like I say, had to learn boxing itself and actually learn how to do all the different things, because kickboxing is very different to boxing. You have to worry about a completely different skill set, and so he's had to learn that and develop that. And to be fair, he has kind of surprised me on how well he has developed, especially, like I say, coming from kickboxing. And I do think this is the time and a good opportunity to get him a world title fight. Of course, it's coming up against somebody who, yes, has a big name, but is coming off a loss, and he could have ended up fighting the likes of a Nakatani, or there's a few real big, bad names to be up against for a world title fight. Whereas Takuma Inoue, you could argue, is probably one of the nicer names to be coming up against when you are an elite level talent like Nasukawa is. Not to guarantee that he's going to win this fight, because I think it is going to be a very competitive fight, but again, he could have been up against one of the elite pound for pound level fighters, and of course, instead, Nakatani's gone his own way. So again, I think it is smart matchmaking for this fight. Inoue, as a fighter, though, he's somebody who is able to land quite sneaky shots when he's in close. He's able to kind of creep in with a nice uppercut. Again, they are quite similar fighters, the two of them. He's got solid timing, Inoue. He chops down nicely to the body. He catches you coming in. He does have heart. I've seen a few people question if he, has that heart and that desire. And I think that last fight did show and prove that, to be fair. I don't think you can discredit his heart. And of course, he did take a lot of punishment in that Satsumi fight, and he didn't go down. I mean, he almost did at one point, but he didn't. He stuck there. He was, fighting to the end, trying to do all he could, and he went the full distance, and he was able to at least keep a good output into the later part of the fight. He's good at coming in for the big overhands, and they are a nice weapon in which, to be fair, Nasukawa doesn't throw a tremendous amount of. He's at his best when he's allowed that space and he has that time to be in and out, but something in which I would really like to see him not do in this fight is just make the fight closer when it doesn't need to be a closer matchup. If he is winning the fight and if he is having success as a range going in and out, then there's no point for him to try and go up in close and try and make the fight a war and trying to, be the bigger ego guy and put on the big knockout performance. He doesn't need to necessarily do that. If the opportunity's there, then fair enough. But there's just been multiple fights in which I've seen him, against Satsumi Satsumi putting on the pressure, so it's a bit different. But when he fought Ankayas, that was a fight in which he was dominating, but coming in and out, landing, he would land a nice shot, then he would back off. But then at one point he just kind of went toe to toe with Ankayas and gave Ankayas the opportunity to land on him and to actually hit him, which again is probably entertaining for the fans, but it's not really what you'd recommend for a boxer to do. Like I say, it's putting himself in risky positions. He can ride shots and he can slip and slide and kind of duck under, and he doesn't have bad head movement, but like I say, if he's dominating, he doesn't need to get himself in them positions in the first place. He has a good level of power, and you probably would have to argue that his power is a bit more significant, or at least had more of an effect on his opponents than that of what Nasukawa has had. Nasukawa came into the professional game, he got a nice knockout to start off with, but since then, since going through the levels, he's not been able to stop as many opponents. I think he's had only 2 stoppages, whereas Inoue, when he was a world champion, he was able to get a couple of stoppages. He's got good hand speed, and I think he is accurate more so in his exchanges compared to a lot of his opponents if he is going toe to toe. Of course, that wasn't really quite the case against Sumi, but again, in some of his other world title fights, that was the case. Negatives about him, I think he can be moved about, and that he isn't physically strong at all. Not to say that Nasukawa is physically strong, which again probably would lead into Inoue's favour for this fight, because I don't think this is going to be as much of a rough type fight where it's going to be a real physical opponent putting on a lot of pressure, because that's what it was with Satsumi. I don't think it's going to be that this fight, but of course, against Satsumi, he struggled with the physical pressure and he was getting moved around a lot in that fight, and it was quite evident. And of course, that's not good for the judges to see that. He does get frustrated, and I think he was definitely getting visibly frustrated. I think he's an overconfident fighter for the most part as well, and can, like I say, fight frustrated, and that's another reason why he can get in close and just start trying to rip into a wall for no reason. But I also think that Nasukawa can be a bit of an overconfident fighter as well. His footwork can be messy when he's going in combinations, especially if he's becoming a bit desperate. He leaves himself open to the body, and Satsumi was going to the body nicely in their fights. He can be caught whilst throwing. He's definitely willing to sit on the ropes far too long, in my opinion. Nasukawa was also quite willing to sit on the ropes, to be fair, as well. He, like I say, is trying to fight in the pocket too much. I don't think he makes a tremendous amount of adjustments in the fight, and I think he can be a little bit ill-disciplined when he's fighting as well. He can throw too much in singles when which aren't necessarily pushing you back. And if he's on the back foot and if he is on the ropes and he's trying to land these sneaky single shots, yes, they can land, and yes, they can be nice, and yes, they can even have an effect. But if they don't have an effect, then what are you going to do? You're still in that bad position if they don't have an effect. And I think they didn't really have much of an effect on Satsumi. His chin is quite often in the air. He can be standing and trading quite a lot, like I mentioned. He can forget his jab or his setup. He does often duck down to the right into the opponent's hook, which then he could get caught with, and then he'll stumble backwards as a result of that. And that happened a couple of times in his last fight, and Nasukawa might be able to catch him with that. And he does allow unnecessary shots to get through quite often, just from trying to overly slip and slide shots. He's just putting himself in that bad position and just allowing himself to be there just to try and show off to an extent, when he could just, like I say, be a bit more disciplined and move off. Nasukawa, as a fighter, I think he holds his shape pretty well. I think that's something which has come from his kickboxing days. You have to always be ready to go, for any sort of kick, of course, when you're kickboxing. So I feel like you do have to come with a nice shape, especially in the lower weight divisions of kickboxing. He's a sharp, fast striker who is able to, come with good counters. He's works angles well as well. I think he works angles better than that of Inoue, and he'll step off to the side and go for a nice uppercut from there. He takes steps backwards, and is there to, make space. He's willing to take that little subtle step backwards to make the space to then throw, and that's been a bit more evident and has been something in which I've seen that he's visibly improved on in his matchups as he's gone through the levels. He's got good head movement. I think his head movement when he's in his flow state is really good. He's got strong body work. He's got nice uppercuts as well. They both have nice uppercuts, and they both have a good shot variety selection, to them. So I think it will be a good kind of offensive skill set in which we'll see on display in this fight. He throws from low to high. He walks you onto shots. He's got, like I say, good shot variety, can handle pressure and still get his work off. That was what I really had to question in the fight against Maloney, and I didn't think he would be able to handle the pressure. And Maloney did put it on him, and he did catch him with a couple of shots, which he had to, get used to. But every fighter has to get used to that, and I wasn't too sure if it was too soon. But he showed that, like I say, he can handle that pressure and still get some work off. Not to say that Maloney is one of the highest level pressure fighters in the game. He's not a true Mexican war kind of opponent, but I think he does, bring a good level of pressure and want to bring a fight, and Nasukawa was able to deal with that. Like I say, he goes body to head well. He's got good creative feints. He'll be, like I say, if he's going to come with that overconfidence, if he can use it in feints, then there's not really too much wrong with that. If he'll go just throw a hand off to the side just to make you feint, with the speed in which he has, it probably would still be a good feint as well. So I don't mind if he's overconfident coming with the creative feints, if that's the way that he's going to show his confident kind of showing off type style. He waits for openings to become available before he'll then go and land a nice shot. When he gets his jab going and working off it, that's nice, and he's able to land his short hooks at a downwards angle, which often is quite a nice downwards chop, which of course can land in a good position on the head. Negatives about him: he looks to, in my opinion, I think he does look to carry less power. I think it's more visible that he carries less power out of the two, and whenever he does land a powerful shot, it has to be really when he lands a perfectly timed shot, or if he's able to really load up on it, whereas I think Inoue does carry more natural power. He can be caught when he's trying to wait for a counter of his own, like I say, when he is loading up a bit. He's, like I say, not faced as high a level of a war type fighter yet, and he hasn't, of course, been there 12 rounds just yet either. He can be trying to force the KO a bit at times. He's not overly physical either. He can get dragged into a war himself. I'm not sure how disciplined he is either, to be fair. He has quite wide overhands when he is throwing, and that has been visible on a couple of occasions against Santillan in that final few seconds of their fight. They were both kind of just slugging it out, and it was a bit weird, and he was coming with some wild overhands then. He will load up on his ropes. He doesn't always know when to plant his feet against pressure opponents, and that was where he was getting caught on a couple of occasions against Maloney. Like I say, overconfidence, playing to the crowd too much. He does have quite a weak guard. He can, he can't always try and push you back, and sometimes he is trying to do that too much. And sometimes he can be relying too much on his left hand and not actually mixing in the right hand as well. Like I say, when he's at his best, he's in his flow state. He's mixing in a really good, arsenal of shots, but sometimes it is visible that he is just leading off on his left hand a bit too much. But who do I think is going to win in this fight? I think that Tenshin Nasukawa is going to be able to win via majority decision or unanimous decision. I think it's going to be a decision, and I think it's going to be a real tough test for Tenshin Nasukawa, and probably, the toughest in his career. Of course, Inoue's coming off a loss, but he's going to be coming into this fight with some real vengeance and wanting to put on a good performance, and I think he's not going to be somebody that will just wilt away. I would like to see this be a bit more of a mid-range type fight, but in the latter rounds, with both of their ill discipline, in my opinion, I think it could play out into a bit of a war come the end, and that's where Inoue might be able to land some better shots. So if Nasukawa is able to come out faster, doing the cleaner work, because I think his in and out style, holding his shape, is better than Inoue's when he holds his shape and he's a bit more in and out. So I think if Nasukawa was able to outbox him a bit in the early rounds, Takuma will probably get frustrated, try and make it a war, then actually land better in close. Again, these are all the things I've just listed as negatives for Inoue, but I think it probably would benefit him in this fight just because Nasukawa hasn't had to deal with it at a tremendous level just yet. And then, like I say, Nasukawa might get drawn into a bit of a war, but it will be an interesting one. And it will be interesting because I don't know if Inoue is just going to be throwing the single shots but bringing a lot of pressure, or if Nasukawa was actually, or if how Nasukawa is going to be able to deal with that. Like I say, two guys who want to be physical fighters but aren't really that physical, to be fair. It definitely will be interesting, but I think Nasukawa does have the better skill set in the early to mid rounds to be able to win enough rounds to then get him the title in a close decision. And then who he goes on to fight, possibly Takuma Inoue again if it's a really good fight. But if not, then a Nishida fight could be a good fight. I don't really want to go to see him fight another champion just yet, so a Nishida fight could be a good fight, even though, of course, Nishida is coming off a loss. Or an Andrew Kane fight would be a really interesting fight, how he deals with a fighter like Andrew Kane. But I'm not entirely sure if that would happen. It's difficult because, there's some real big names in the WBC kind of bantamweight rankings. I mean, I know Estrada is a name who's floating around there, who's in a really good ranked position, and I just don't know if I want to see Tenshin versus Estrada. It's a strange fight to see. So it's interesting, and I don't really know what route they would go down. But yeah, I think possibly them guys, they probably won't want to give him too tough of a matchup as his first defence, of course, if he does win the title. Moving on to the co-main event now, and it is, of course, Mikito and Nakano versus Aleem, which is the IBF eliminator for the featherweight world title. And this is a good fight to make for the mandatory IBF world featherweight title spot. And of course, everyone knows that with the IBF being involved, they'll probably force the winner of this fight to fight Liao. Otherwise, they'll strip Angelo Liao. And Liao hasn't really been fighting a tremendous amount. I mean, he had his first defense in Japan from my memory, so maybe he could go out there and have another fight in Japan against a better opponent if Nakano wins, but I don't know if he would probably prefer to have a big American name. Of course, Liao versus an Espinosa is a bigger fight than a Nakano, who isn't really that big of a name just yet, but they're building him, and he could be the next big hope for the featherweight division in Japan, because I do feel like the Japanese featherweight division is lacking, and of course without Inoue moving up into the featherweight division, there isn't really that much evident talent out and about, in my opinion. And yeah, so I think Nakano really has an opportunity as a TKO kind of specialist, in which he's kind of turning out to be, to really put on a good performance here, make a statement. If he's able to stop Aleem, of course, the former world title challenger in Sam Goodman wasn't able to do that, so it could be a real statement if he goes out here and gets a stoppage. Of course, this is Aleem's chance himself to get a full world title shot. He is away from home yet again, fighting in Japan, but he is by far the more experienced out of the two of them. He is the former WBA interim super bantamweight world champion, and he's beaten some pretty good names. Not names that are crazily big, but he's beaten them up, against Plania and against Baez. Baez he really beat up, but like I say, neither of them are the elite of the elite. They're just known names who have given, fights against pretty, much better opposition in the past, if that makes sense. They're like gatekeepers. But when he got to elite level test, he lost a close decision against Sam Goodman. But again, that was a close decision, and it was in Sam Goodman's home country. So you kind of have to give Aleem the credit for going over there. Of course, he's coming over here to Japan to fight Nakano as well, which is of course Nakano's his home country. So again, you got to give Aleem the credit for taking the opportunities in which are available to him. Since then, he's been ticking away on top ranked cards, waiting for his opportunity, possibly. You could say that Tekken have been wanting to keep him around and ready, or have been telling Top Rank to keep him around and ready, waiting for a fighter like Nakano to come through, just to get him that moment, to get him that opportunity in the limelight against a good opponent like Aleem. And Aleem, like I say, he's coming off a couple of wins since his loss to Goodman, so it's definitely going to be Nakano's toughest fights by far. And if you don't know, Nakano is another exciting fighter coming out of Japan. He's 14-0 with 13 KOs, with a good amateur background, and is heading into the prime of his career now. He is 30 years old. Of course, like I say, this is his true test to see how good he is as a talent, but like I say, he is the leading guy at the moment for a featherweight talent to come out of Japan, in my opinion. Of course, Nakano has had multiple highlight reel moments as a result of the knockouts in which he's had, but obviously he's not fought at that high of a level so far just yet. Nakano has, been landed on and caught by a couple shots when he's a bit too tense and throwing a bit too much and gunning for the KO a bit too much. He's fought on a couple big cards and the big shows, and he's had a couple shots land on him. Of course, he's been able to get the knockout, so that's why they probably haven't met him on these big shows, but it's evident that he has sometimes gone for the KO a bit. When he's in this flow state, I believe he is better than Aleem in actual technical boxing ability, but Aleem has a bit of a strange style, to be fair. He'll kind of jump in and out. He's quite explosive, but when he comes in, he's lunging in quite heavily, and he's really launching himself in. Then he'll just land a single shot, probably miss one or two, but he'll come with a lot of pressure, but then does leave himself open to counters afterwards. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think Nakano can't be just gunning for the knockout against Aleem, but I do think the knockout possibly could come if he catches Aleem when he's lunging in. I've seen Nakano at times, box well and move well and slip shots and then be able to counter with fast hands. And, like I say, he holds his shape well. He's, like I say, a power punch. He'll go to the body, to the head nicely. But I've also seen him at times, like I say, being too tense and then getting caught as a result of that. I think that Nakano's actually going to be able to go out there and get a stoppage in this fight. I think he's going to win via TKO in round 5, which again might be a bit of a bold shout because, of course, you look at Aleem's record and he's not been stopped, but Sam Goodman, who he fought at the elite level, of course, isn't a powerful striker. And Nakano, this is his real test to see how powerful he actually is. But from the shots in which he's landing, it does look to really have an impact on his fighters and the opponents in which he's fighting, and it doesn't seem to take much effort out of him. So I think there is a lot of natural talent and natural power there. And he's not that young either, 30 years of age. He's definitely grown into his body and his size, and I think this is a good opportunity for him to go out there and get a good stoppage, and a TKO in round 5 is what I'm going with. And if he does, of course, he really has put himself in a good opportunity, in a good spot to force himself an Angelo Leao fight. Of course, Trinidad, who was one of the other guys in line for that fight, he lost, so he's kind of have to probably wait a little bit longer if he's able to get a title shot. So if he, he could go on to fight Leao, and that possibly, it's probably a more riskier fight for Leao to take, but he might be forced to take it unless Leao goes on to fight one of the other champions. So again, I'm not really too sure if he will get a title shot next, but he might do. And then if not, possibly he could even go on to fight somebody like a Sam Goodman. Goodman coming off a loss possibly might have to come over to Japan to fight an up-and-coming guy. But again, I'm not really too sure what kind of route they're going to want to go down with Nakano, especially if he does go out there and get a stoppage win in this fight. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.